speech about online pornography where he'll announce that every household in the UK will have pornography blocked by their internet provider unless that household chooses to opt in to receive it. We were hoping to bring it to you live, but there are various technical problems. Apologies. The Prime Minister will say he wants to protect children from accessing internet pornography, which he believes is corroding childhood. David Cameron also wants to make it illegal in England and Wales to access online pornography that simulates rape. It's already illegal in Scotland. And he wants to stop people being able to search for child abuse images through their internet search engines. Plus, he'd like a blacklist of search terms taken up by the providers, which not only blocks what can be searched, but also gives a warning that what someone might be trying to do is illegal. Mr. Cameron says that it is this last point that the government is currently clashing with the search engines over, as they see it as an infringement of free speech. Mr. Cameron says the internet industry needs to take more responsibility.
We're on the case. This is going to be a big campaign. There are some specific steps we can take right now. Give the Internet Watch Foundation resources and ability to take down images. Make sure the police run a really tough campaign to find these images and find the people putting them up. But the final piece of the jigsaw, which is even more responsible behaviour by the companies, they're not doing nothing, but I want them to do more.
Let's talk now to Mark Williams-Thomas, a child protection expert, also to Christine Bicknell, who is the grandmother of Tia Sharp. Tia Sharp was murdered by Miss Bicknell's former partner, Stuart Hazel, who had a history of viewing child pornography online. Also, Jim Killock is with us, Executive Director of the Open Rights Group, which defends freedom of expression and privacy on the internet. And we were hoping that all of you could have heard the speech and then we could have heard your reaction, but sadly because of those technical problems that hasn't been possible. I think we all get the general gist though. Mark Williams-Thomas, what exactly do you think will happen here as a result of what Mr. Cameron wants?
Good morning. I think we have to determine that these are two very separate issues. The first issue with regard to adult pornography, and absolutely it's right now that the government step in and say that access to pornography has to be an opt-in. And by that I mean if you're a householder, in order to gain access to adult pornography, you have to choose to view it. So there's an automatic barring. That technology exists, it sits on your home modem, and it's available there, and it's been available for a very long time. The separate issue, which is the issue of access to child abuse images, is one that the government sadly have confused with viewing of adult pornography. They are two very separate issues. They require very separate approaches. Currently, child abuse material is illegal. So if you search for that material, if you obtain that material, it is illegal. What needs to happen is actually the government needs to start saying, well, let's take this very seriously. Let's get a national centre to take on board the proactive operational searching of child abuse material, and then let's get regional forces to be able to do it. The problem is the responsibility at the moment sits with local police forces. They are budget strapped, they don't have the resources to take this. And let's use one example. Last year, the centre of CEOP, the Online Protection Centre, they identified 50,000 people within UK who had child abuse images. Yet only 4% a year on average are prosecuted. That tells you that the large majority of those people who possess images are not being prosecuted.
And you say that's simply down to resources and manpower?
The only way to tackle this is through proactive policing. Let's get these people prosecuted, let's get them to court. There's some questions around whether the sentences are appropriate. I mean, anybody who possesses child abuse images, I say, should have a minimum of a 1 year sentence, and obviously that should increase depending on what there is. And that's why we need to look at it very differently. The people who go looking for child abuse material do not go looking for it on Google search engine. They go to Tor, which is the onion networks, they go to peer-to-peer networks, they go to forums and chat facilities where these are readily available.
Okay, so the idea that Mr. Cameron is announcing today, this idea that adults will have to opt in on their household devices, you say, yes, that's good, but that will have no impact on the volume of child sex abuse imagery that's out there.
Absolutely, and this is where the government are missing the issue. They are two very separate issues. Claire Perry's done very well the MP in relation to raising the issue of adult pornography, but she's completely off the mark, as are so many other people advising the PM in relation to child abuse material. Very separate images, separate issues, need to be dealt with separately.
Right. So if you are somebody who likes to access child pornography online, you simply opt in and will be able to continue to.
Well, interestingly enough, there's some members of Parliament this morning have said that, you can opt into viewing child abuse material online. This just goes to show their ignorance. It is illegal. There is no need for new legislation. The PM's talking today.
It may be illegal, Mark, but it happens.
But it happens, and that's why we need to be proactive about it. So actually, in terms of new legislation, the government is saying, the PM has said, I'm going to introduce new legislation which will assist the police in looking at what he refers to the dark web. And for your listeners here, that's the area which is the underworld of the internet, which is accessible via certain software called Tor, which are onion networks, where offenders will go and readily available material is shared in millions every single day. The police already have that technology. What needs to happen is that they need to properly now resource this and say, do you know what, let's have a zero tolerance in relation to child abuse material. Let's give police forces a proper resource to be able to do it. Let's take away the responsibility sitting at local level. Let's put it into a regional level. Let's create 4 regional police forces whose sole responsibility is properly financed in order to go and tackle these individuals. Because it's not until you start fighting this in the same way as the biggest deterrent in relation to drink driving is actually having police officers on the ground to stop and arrest people. Let's put exactly the same resources into protecting children through child abuse material.
Christine Bicknell, thank you for talking to us. What do you think of this plan of David Cameron's to get households to have to opt in if they want to access adult pornography?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you want to access adult pornography, that's entirely your choice. But I do believe that anybody that chooses to access child pornography, there's a person sitting at the end of the computer that's uploading all that. They should be targeted, severely targeted. And people who choose to access it, they know they're doing something illegal. Why can they not be prosecuted for it?
But the idea that this opting in suggestion, I mean, Mr. Cameron says it will stop young people either deliberately or inadvertently coming across adult pornography. Do you think that will happen?
To be honest with you, I mean, I don't really know much about the internet. I'm not very much up to date with computers. I don't know. I don't know what the best answer would be, but my own honest opinion is that it should be stopped.
Right. Let's bring in Jim then. Jim Killick, who is Executive Director of the Open Rights Group, which defends the freedom of expression and privacy on the internet. Hello, Mr. Killick.
Hiya.
Hi. What do you make of Mr. Cameron's plan?
Well, I agreed a lot actually with what Mark said. I don't agree with him about quite how adult filters should be supplied to households, but I do very much agree with him on several points. For a start, I think we do have to consider both of these. Well, there's actually 3 issues that David Cameron's raised. One is how we define extreme pornography, which is a very complicated issue, which must be handled sensitively because some of this will be about consensual adults. You don't want to criminalise people unnecessarily. You've got to be careful when you criminalise people if they're not doing harm to anyone else. That's first question. Second question was about child abuse images, which we all agree should be illegal, are illegal, and must be combated. But I very much agree with Mark that tackling this through search engines is probably fairly irrelevant. Personally, I think it's a bit of a gimmicky policy because it's easy to bully search engines into doing something about something they know will damage their reputation if they don't react. It's much harder to do the things that Mark was talking about with policing, which require resources and money, and yet we haven't heard those things from the Prime Minister. We should have also been hearing about how he's going to tackle money laundering of money made from child abuse images, and we should have also heard about how he's going to work with groups with policing internationally and international governments to shorten the amount of time it takes to
So
remove
there's clearly a
these
lot more
images.
to be done. Clearly a lot more to be done. But the principle, first of all, of the first bit of the plan, the opt-in, yes?
Well,
No.
no. I actually said something really, really dangerous today.
Dangerous?
David Cameron advised parents that once they had these network filters, that they would, with one click, be able to make all of their children safe. That's really bad advice. Really, really bad advice. Because, firstly, network filtering is not especially robust. It doesn't really stop everything, it can only stop a certain amount of the material because it has to identify it.
Okay, there may be flaws, but the principle, good or bad?
Well, the principle should be choice, and you have to, I think it's very important to remember that we're not just talking about pornography when we talk about children.
There will be choice. You can choose to opt in if you want to access adult pornography.
Actually, what I think will happen is it will be a question, do you need or wish to install filters, yes or no, and then you'll move on to questions. I think that's a fairly sensible approach. The bizarre thing that's going on today is, in order to claim victory to the Daily Mail, David Cameron is saying you'll have to opt into porn. I don't think that's quite what is going to happen. At least I hope not, because it'll be, do you want to opt into being able to view a range of political content? Do you wish to opt into being able to see the pubs and bars and alcohol-related sites of the Rose and Crown down the road? And I just don't think those things should be switched off by default. And I'm honestly, whereas if you're talking about protecting children, maybe you do want to switch those things off, along with the BBC News site, which contains an awful lot of violence in places like Syria and so on, which again you may wish to restrict from your children. You may need to restrict from your children.
Okay. Christine, let me ask you what your view is about the accessing of child abuse imagery that Stuart Hazel did, and how much you feel it played a part in the death of your granddaughter.
I don't know exactly what pornography sites he was going on to. I don't know what he was accessing, and I don't know what he was looking at. I don't agree that it's what caused him to do what he done to my granddaughter. Whatever that was already in him, but I agree it fed it. It was like a food. It made it grow. So maybe if he hadn't have seen any of that, maybe he wouldn't have gone to the extent he did. That's something I'll never know.
Do you have a message for the internet service providers who potentially allow people to access that sort of imagery?
My message to them is, if they can't close it down, then I believe that they should be severely prosecuted, because they are as bad as the people behind the computer that's uploading it.
Jim Kellett, what about that view of prosecuting the ISPs, the internet service providers, for hosting that kind of content?
Well, I think we have to be a little bit careful. Absolutely, they should be prosecuted if they're hosting content, and they are. Nobody in the UK hosts this kind of content. It is deleted from servers very, very quickly. The problem that ISPs have is that they are, in effect, a kind of pipe, and they don't know what's coming down that pipe per se. When they find that the child abuse images are being accessed through their networks, what they do is firstly they block them very quickly, and again, they're very responsible about that. They block those images. Google, if they find those websites indexed in their search, they remove them from their database. But they can't remove them from source because they're probably hosted somewhere else. And that's the part we need to concentrate on, because most of those sites are either in the United States or sometimes Eastern Europe and so on, but they're not generally in the UK. The problem that the UK police have is that they have to, or the Internet Watch Foundation have, is that they've got to get the foreign website hosts to respond to the takedown requests. As I say, at the moment that's taking days.
Yes.
Rather than ours.
And Jim Killick and Mark Williams-Thomas, do you understand this in terms of what the Prime Minister is announcing today? Is this a sort of warning to to ISPs, or is legislation going to follow to force them to do this?
Well, I mean, I think ISPs are very aware. I'd be the first to criticise ISPs if I thought they weren't actively doing something, but they are. A lot of them install photo DNA, which enables them to look at some of these images. And many of these internet service providers really are trying to reduce the amount of accessibility to child abuse material. But the problem is there seems to be a lack of understanding what ISPs do. ISPs are very much a gateway in ordering individuals to be able to go to other sites. The large majority of child abuse material that is being accessed through the hidden internet, through onion sites, through peer-to-peer, huge amounts of problems on peer-to-peer. And until you start to tackle that issue, you don't start to deal with the issues of child abuse material. That is why it's really important that the government actually separate these two issues. Let's deal with the issue of accessing adult pornography, which is an issue of desensitization, of sexualization of children. Let's limit the amount of access. Gone are the days where children could gain access to adult pornography either through something their parents have collected or through the shop. The accessibility now and the desensitization in relation to sexual activity is accessible in the playground through mobile phones.
Well, that's where today's speech will have no impact, because if teenagers have mobile phones that have internet access, they will be able to access adult pornography. And also, they are sending photos between themselves, some of them, of them with their girlfriend or friend in, uncompromising positions.
Absolutely, and this is why what needs to happen is we need to have a proper approach and determine through some kind of knowledge and understanding to say these are very complex issues. They need to be dealt with individually. I am totally in support of the Prime Minister wanting to tackle the issue of online pornography as an opt-in, and particularly around the child sexualization, but these are very different issues of child abuse material. Let's separate the two and let's deal with them separately. The government have bundled this all together. They've tried to put it into a situation which is PR attractive, and as a result of that, sadly, it'll have little impact on what we're really talking about here, which is the sexual abuse of children and photographing video that abuse and putting it up online.
Thank you all very much.